Hello and welcome to the Anthropocene Cabaret Part 2. Now, some of you may have seen or may have forgotten Part 1, which took a more deep time view of life, going back to the Big Bang, the formation of the stars and planets, and the evolution of life on Earth. And we concluded that human existence on Earth is just a blip in the bigger scheme of things, but a blip that is causing the extinction of other species at an alarming rate. It is changing the actual composition of this planet and its atmosphere. Now, if the dinosaurs hadn't been wiped out by that fatal meteorite, of course they might be busy at this very moment mining fossil fuels to heat vast palaces where they could warm their cold-blooded bodies and run a vicious reptilian hierarchical global system of control. Or they might be living peacefully by hot springs, writing poetry. The largest mammal would still be no bigger than a rat, and Facebook would never have happened. Anyway, the poor old dinosaurs went, mammals grew bigger, and eventually Homo sapiens, so-called, arrived and proceeded speedily, in geological terms, to snuff out or severely damage some of the most glorious products of evolution. Rainforests, wetlands, temperate forests, tigers, bison, coral reefs, whales, frogs, vast numbers of insects and birds, and on and on. Why? How? Today we're going to focus on the here and now, with a bit of recent, in geological terms, history. We are 3 months away, COVID permitting, from COP26, the so-called Conference of the Parties, the United Nations Climate Conference, which is due to take place in Glasgow from November the 1st to the 12th. Here, governments will burble on about how we can prevent deforestation by selling carbon credits, so forests can be chopped down and replaced with other forests that are already chopped down or might last another 10 or 20 years, so more people can get on planes and feel good about it. And they'll say how we can't stop the oil companies carrying on extracting oil and gas because most governments have signed up to the Oil Charter, which means the likes of Exxon, Shell, Total and all the rest can sue governments for loss of profits if they try to close them down. And anyway, all the big fossil fuel corporations have seats at the conference because they're major sponsors. And we can't talk about population control because that's eugenics and fascism. And more importantly, political suicide, and look what happened in China. And we can't de-intensify farming because we've done deals with Monsanto, Syngenta and all the big agribusiness corporations, and we need to control India, and everyone's fighting over Africa because history repeats itself. At the same conference, there will be the voices of indigenous peoples who are witnessing the destruction of their lands and landscapes. The testimonies of brave campaigners from countries where defenders of forests and oceans and rivers are murdered by hired thugs from corporations and corrupt governments. And the protesters from all over the world saying, this is not how it should be. We have to change. How did we get here? Well, there's different reasons, but let's start by going back a little while in history to the 16th and 17th centuries. The explorers. So there came the European explorers, circling the earth to gain their monarch's favours. Brave they were, sailing into unknown waters. Those that came back brought tales of fabulous places, dripping with treasure. Gold, silver, diamonds and strange plants, coffee, sugar, tea, tobacco and potatoes, and chocolate drunk with chili for breakfast by Montezuma. Europe was on a caffeine and sugar high, but it came at a cost, a terrible cost, paid for in blood, blood of our own kind. And slavery, justified by Christianity, and false notions of superiority, debasing everyone's humanity. Once the first wounds were inflicted, it was just too easy to go on. Africa, Asia and America, pillaged and destroyed. their people scattered, murdered or enslaved, poisoned by disease and religion. Then came oil, the 20th century curse. Oil won wars, oil built empires, and oil is driving us all to destruction. As the heat builds up and the planet burns, floods and fires, barren land, vanished species, war against each other and the earth, while governments do deals with corporations. Exxon, Total, Shell, BP, Rio Tinto, Monsanto, Syngenta, and on and on and on. The earth is up for sale, and every living thing is collateral. Collateral in the sense of something that is offered as a pledge when you're getting a loan. For example, I'll give you $1,000 billion if you just make sure that that rainforest is kept for me. Anyway, that's all a bit depressing. What can we do? Well, first of all, it does help to know what you're up against. We humans have a problem with power, and we have to face up to it. Just look at our own government and what's happened since the start of the pandemic. The disastrous track and trace system, which originally the government wanted to hand to Google and Apple, and then when they realised that was going to take too long, they handed to Serco for £108 million. And yes, that's the same Serco that was given a contract for electronic tagging of asylum seekers and prisoners and was discovered to be tagging dead people. And last year, the track and trace system cost a staggering £23 billion and it didn't even work properly. Crony deals. Crony deals keep the wheels of capitalism turning. Crony deals oil the wheels as the forests keep on burning. Lies and corruption fueling destruction. Sleazy business settled with a handshake. Governments are busy signing deals with corporations. Poor countries can't expect to get their vaccinations. Trade deals oil the wheels that stink of corruption. Revolving doors keep turning, politicians keep on earning. Talking to the Treasury is easy for some, like Sir James Dyson, who can just ring up his charm. If it doesn't make a profit, what's the point of it? Every living thing is measured by its monetary value. Economic growth, they say, is what it's all about, but you need good connections and a whole load of clout. Who cares about the workers if they lose their jobs? Justice doesn't make the profits, truth is up for sale. Greensill or Topwood, the story is the same. The rich just get richer and poverty remains. We haven't got time for this. We're in a crisis. Don't give in, keep insisting, don't give in, keep resisting, keep resisting, keep insisting, keep insisting, keep resisting. So just to clarify, Boris Johnson pledged to fix tax issues for the billionaire Dyson. That's Dyson of the Hoovers, but they're not Hoovers, they're Dysons. Because Dyson lobbied the Treasury. And Dyson is notorious for shifting a lot of work to Malaysia because he could pay people much lower wages back in 2003. Greensill Capital, that's a finance firm, part of something called supply chain finance. It allows big companies to settle their bills by shifting the debt to another company. It was directly involved in the collapse of Carillion. Remember Carillion? David Cameron had a lot of shares in Greensill, and he really lobbied the government to try and bail it out, but they didn't, and he lost all his shares. And in the meantime, lots of steelworkers' jobs were threatened. And Topwood. Now, that's a document shredding and scanning company, and it so happens that Health Secretary Matt Hancock's sister, Emily Gilruth, is a director. And Hancock owns more than 15% of shares in the company. And it won a contract with the NHS just after Hancock got his government post, and he didn't declare his interest. Well, I suppose he wouldn't. Talking of corporations, I wonder what our Trade Secretary, Liz Truss, might say if I just dropped in on her for a cup of tea. She must be so busy with all her trade deals. We found it very easy to control society non-violently, so the people think they're free. Keep them shopping, 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 keep them shopping. Keep them shopping, 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 keep them shopping. Make sure they go by car, even if it's not so far, so the oil can keep on flowing and the economy keep growing. Keep on shopping, keep on shopping, keep them 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 shopping. If people start complaining, we need to give them training so they won't stop buying, because we must keep trying to secure those trade deals. The bilateral deal with Australia, the deal with North America, the Pacific Partnership, and all those countries with lower standards than ours. So the economy keeps growing while the money keeps on flowing. Keep them shopping, 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 keep them shopping. And by the way, this year Earth Overshoot Day falls on July the 29th. Now last year, because of the pandemic, it was a bit later. It fell on August the 22nd. And the date marks when humans have used up all the resources, all the natural resources for the year. And after that, we begin to draw down reserves that we should be saving for life on Earth to go on being viable. It's based on a calculation of biocapacity. That's the Earth's ability to sustain human demands for its resources, including forest destruction, greenhouse gas emissions, species extinction. And on the website, they say, move the date, move the date, move the date to the end of the year, or better still, move the date way into next year, so that we are saving our resources and not recklessly throwing them out. It's not always easy, but there are things we can do. One thing we can do is refuse to shop, and if we can't completely give up shopping, at least we can make decisions about where, why, and how to shop. So take food, for example. What you pay for your food may not reflect its true cost. Intensive agriculture is one of the biggest drivers of climate change. According to the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, over 8.5% of emissions come from intensive agriculture, with another 14% attributable to change land use. That's mostly chopping down forests. And it's unnecessary because 2/3 of the world's food is produced by small farmers, mostly women, mostly without chemicals. But corporations and governments have done a very good job of persuading people that A, there isn't enough food to go around, B, we need technology to feed the poor, and C, corporations will do it much better than the wisdom of generations of food growers. Now, in reply to A, there is enough. There is more than enough food to feed the world. The trouble is that a lot of it is wasted, either by lack of storage space when first harvested, or poor transport so it can get fast enough to where it needs to go. Then it's chucked away from shops because of its sell-by date. And finally, a huge amount is chucked out by households and restaurants and cafes where people take the food and then just don't eat it and throw it in the bin. And more than that, 1/3 of the world's croplands, that's growing mainly cereals and soya, is actually producing food for intensively reared animals. And that food is enough to feed about 4.8 billion people directly. Now, as for B and C, we need technology to feed the poor and corporations can do it better. Well, here's a little story. When Cubans were literally starving because the US blockade has always been in place and the Soviet Union had collapsed, so Cuba wasn't getting any more oil, the government took action and everybody started growing food, even if it was in window boxes outside flats. And they did things like they went and found older farmers who taught younger people how to plough with oxen, how to scythe, how to thresh crops. And they even welded bicycles together to make human buses. And Cuba survived and nobody starved. The thing about the corporate way and the technological fix is that it's trying to control nature, bind nature to our will, rather than working together with nature, of which we are part. According to the World Wildlife Fund, 60% of global diversity loss is down to the food we eat. And over half the mammal species on Earth are domesticated. More and more cows and sheep, fewer and fewer water voles, hares, bears, elephants. And talking of domesticated animals, let's not forget dogs. Grey wolf, what did humans do to you? Hunted and hated, or turned into a corgi, woof woof, or a pug, a lapdog, or words to the bone. Man's best friend reads our mind and knows our ways. Man's best friend, it's sad if left alone for days. Man's best friend, he's there to calm us if we're stressed. Trips us up and makes a mess, chases cyclists, bites the postman, steals the biscuits and freaks out waters. Man's best friend wants to be part of the pack. Man's best friend hopes it will be near the top. Man's best friend produces lots of smelly poo, and we don't know what to do with it, especially since lockdown. Man's best friend can be our special eyes and ears. Man's best friend sniffs out drugs and diseases. Man's best friend, will you miss us when we're gone? Do you dream of wilderness? Will you jump out of your basket to be wild and free? I have nothing against dogs, unless they injure me, but they have been co-opted into being essential features of the growth economy. The global dog food industry is worth over $56 billion, and in the UK, nearly $3 billion. That's an awful lot of dog food and an awful lot of dogs. And all those lockdown dogs that people are starting to realise are a lifetime commitment and not just a temporary diversion. But even more than with dogs, we have an issue with chickens on the planet. Now, just quick look at the poultry industry, or rather the plight of the chickens. In 2014, these figures will have gone up, but in 2014, about 65.8 billion chickens were slaughtered, along with 1.5 billion pigs and 0.3% billion cattle. And the ancestor of chickens, the red jungle fowl, is actually not doing so well because of all crossbreeding with domestic chickens, which means the whole genetic chicken pool is getting smaller. Most of the world's domestic chickens are bred by 2 global companies, which makes them, with this genetic scarcity, very, very vulnerable to diseases like avian flu. Currently, at any one point in time, there's about 23 billion domesticated chickens on the earth. We are the planet of the chickens now. And my county of Powys happens to be the poultry capital of Wales, or indeed of Europe. At any one point in time in Powys, there are 8 million chickens crammed into sheds. So this is a song I wrote about what's happening here. In the poultry capital of Wales, there's lots of chicken poo. It's smothering the fields and it isn't good for you. It poisons soil and rivers and makes a fearsome stink. And bubbling spring water is no longer fit to drink. In the poultry capital of Wales, there's slurry to be spread. It doesn't seem to matter if the rivers are all dead. The economy comes first, farmers must diversify, and it's just collateral damage as we watch the landscape die. It's a sad life for the chickens with no daylight or fresh air. They're dead within about a month, but the companies don't care. The profits aren't for locals, they go to global corporations. And as they rake the cash in, they claim they're feeding nations. Restaurants are collapsing, supermarkets are doing well. They drive the prices down and down and let the farmers go to hell. Cheap food is what we need, they cry, to feed those who are poor. But when you slog for hours at minimum wage, you deserve much more. We could feed the world if society were fair, and the fields given back to those who want to live and share, and work the land in common so all can eat well, and no one anywhere will be left to go to hell. In the poultry capital of Wales there isn't time to lose. Future generations depend on what we choose. Don't let them suffocate in a stinking pile of slurry. Don't let the planners fool us saying there's no need to worry. Will we leave to the future a landscape that is dying, with no insects buzzing and just a few birds flying? We can choose a different way so all can live well. We don't have to take the path that leads us into hell. No, we don't have to take the path that leads us into hell. And we do have choices. Even if we can't grow our own food, we can look at it differently, and we don't have to eat meat. But of course, plants are also grown with lots and lots of chemicals as big monocultures, vast fields of tomatoes, potatoes, wheat and maize. So you have to be careful what you eat. Listen to the ugly vegetables. We're misshapen and distorted, well, quite ugly. Behold, we're not symmetrical or well proportioned, or so we're told. But we're flavoursome and wonderful to those who really care. And if you go to Tesco's local, we won't be there. They say the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and certainly it seems that way, especially when you're older. But an ancient tree is a marvel to behold, and nourishes and shelters other life as it grows old. We won't fit on the shelf, we're good for your health. We're not interested in increasing corporate wealth. Life did not evolve to serve the corporations. Those that don't fit in are cause for celebration. Nature doesn't always follow a straight line, bending, curling, wiggling through space and time. Rejoice in the awkward, the misshapen and the plain. Nature doesn't work for profit or for corporate gain. Celebrate your bumps and warts and prickly skin, and the power of the vegetables that won't fit in. Can we imagine ourselves, just a little bit, into the lives of some of the other creatures with whom we share this planet? The drama of the queen bumblebee emerging from months of hibernation with just a short window of time to feed herself enough to be able to build a nest and start a new colony. The spider in her web, acutely sensitive through all her 8 legs to the vibrations that tell her if a visitor is prey or predator or a potential suitor. The dragonfly, emerging glorious from its last larval stage to fly dazzling and brilliant along rivers and ponds. The swallows and the swifts, travelling across oceans and deserts, who need to feed constantly off the insects to keep up their strength. Will there be enough insects for them still? All the creatures that roam the earth, the air and the oceans, the forests, the moorlands, the mountains, the valleys, the deserts, the polar regions, the temperate regions, tropical, swamp, deserts, fungal networks. There's only one Earth like this. have to change fundamentally what it means to be human. As Thomas Berry, who called himself a geologian, he was a Jesuit monk who was interested in all religions and the story of the universe and the ways it can be told and the way our story is part of the story of the universe. He said, we need to take our place in the earth community, respecting, caring about and coexisting with our own rainbow community and all the other species. Stop putting money into war weapons and start listening to those peoples who have been trying to guide humanity away from its seemingly hell-bent path to destruction. No one said it's easy to live sustainably, grow and teach locally, create a green economy. But governments won't do it, and corporations just want to make a profit. So it's down to you and me to build community. Hours of slogging at the weeding, even sitting in boring meetings, talking about insulation or renewable energy installation. But planting trees is a lot of fun, and you feel so good when you get it done. In a year you'll have an apple or pear, and in 5 years there'll be lots to share. Being green doesn't mean a life of sacrifice and pain. It's easy to switch off a light. We don't need to leave them on all night. Forget the big society. Let's build a real community. Create the world we want to see. Take control of the economy. Retire the bunkers, let them be employed more usefully. Growing peacefully, even living collectively. All of us can learn to be on the earth quite differently. No one said it's easy to protect biodiversity, make decisions more slowly, recreate society, find different ways to be, eat more thoughtfully, celebrate Earth's beauty, and every being in the earth community. I want to read a quote from Chief Oren Lyons of the Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy. This was at the opening ceremonies of UN Year for Indigenous Peoples way back in 1995. We went to Geneva, the Six Nations and the Great Lakota Nation, as representatives of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. For a short time, we stood equal among the people and the nations of the world. There is a hue and cry for human rights, they said, for all people. And we said, what of the rights of the natural world? Where is a seat for the buffalo or eagle? Who is representing them here in this forum? Who is speaking for the waters of the earth? Who is speaking for the trees and forests? Who is speaking for the fish, the whales, the beavers, for our children? It is our duty to stand for the natural world and its rights, and also for the generations to come. Because without the water, without the trees, there is no life. And water includes the oceans, and we know the oceans are warming much faster than the land mass, much faster than originally projected, and that's affecting everything. And of course, it's affecting the animals and plants in the oceans, the coral reefs, the kelp forests, the sharks, the whales, and the plankton. We have to save the plankton. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. Happy plankton need enough to eat, but sea. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. To keep our plankton floating happily, we got to do something and do it quickly. Keep that carbon in the ground, change our ways, reverse the positive feedback loop and turn things around. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. And cut your fossil fuel consumption, plant more trees and eat more veg. Save the oceans and the rivers, instead of fencing, grow a hedge. Ditch the plastic, use more baskets. Don't even try to remember what it was you thought you needed. You don't need to buy it, you can get by, I'm sure you can get by. And in that wonderful, brave new world that's coming, when we've limited global warming to 1.5 degrees, what will it be like with each of our visions? The only borders we will know of will be planted full of flowers. Streets will be free of traffic, with children playing outside for hours and hours. Save the plankton in the sea. Save the plankton, keep it floating free. Keep it floating free, keep it floating free. Thank you.